These are supposed to be the industry standard when it comes to build quality and reliability and all that sort of stuff, but apparently these interiors are starting to rattle, and the tech can apparently have major issues and it can ruin the driving experience.
Not to mention reports of losing all engine power when towing on a hot day, and then there's the reports of DPF complications and 7th injector issues.
So what's the story with a used 300 series Land Cruiser? How are they aging? What actually goes wrong with them? And should you buy one? Well, we're about to answer all of those questions because this is ReDriven, and that's exactly what we do. Let's start with the bad news first, and unfortunately, that means getting behind the wheel. You know what can be absolutely terrifying? Towing something that weighs 2 or 3 tons hanging off the back of one of these suddenly become a massive pendulum. And that's something that has apparently happened to plenty of owners because the 300 series lane keep assist can be very, very aggressive. Now, having the steering wheel kind of wanting to yank you left or right when you're not towing something can just be a bit of an annoyance. But when you're towing something that's the size and weight of a small apartment or maybe your shiny new boat, yeah, that's far from ideal. Also, apparently the lane keep technology can just lose its mind on tighter country roads with no lane markings either side. So if you're going away on holidays, maybe just stick to built-up suburban areas or don't tow anything. Also, plenty of owners have felt the urge to punch the steering wheel or the general interior due to all the bloody beeps and boops and warnings and alarms that go off every time you want to hitch a trailer or reverse a caravan or a boat. Now, surely Toyota knew the 300 series was going to become one of the go-to tow vehicles. So why didn't they just install a button or a command on the screen that disables all of these warnings and recalibrates the safety systems? And look, in some markets, on certain models, you can turn a lot of these alerts and warnings and stuff off, but you might have to do that every single time you restart the car because it all just resets itself. And even though the recent 2025 update has been so comprehensive, it has fixed so many of these issues, it can also mean that you can't actually turn off lane keep assist at all. Not that we'd ever recommend you do that. Also, it feels like Toyota are taking the piss a bit by not making the towing wiring harness just standard fitment. It's an extra cost option. It shouldn't be. Likely on the used market, plenty of these have had that option box ticked. But look, overall, these things are fantastic for touring. Actually, if you want to do a deeper dive into the touring chops, check out the Wild Touring YouTube channel. Cam and Tiff on there have documented loads of their trips and touring. Excellent channel, check it out. And when you go through the owners groups and forums, there are just countless owners raving about how great these are at towing, especially when you fit a GVM upgrade to it, just like this vehicle, then they become extremely hard to beat. But do yourself a favor and don't overload it, because we do know of scenarios where insurance policies have been voided because the weight has been exceeded, and you'll generally only find out about that after you've had an accident. And look, obviously you don't want to be the person that forks out the anywhere from $75,000 to over $200,000 for one of these things, only to find out that it's had a prang. Look, there are loads of these things on the used market, so before you go handing over your hard-earned cash, it is so important to get a history report from Motor Registry to make sure the Land Cruiser you're looking at isn't hiding some kind of dodgy past. Not only can these reports show you if the car's been written off, but also if there's any reported damage. That can mean if the previous owner has, say, sideswiped a tree and smashed up the doors and the rear quarter panel, the Motor Registry report can show evidence of that insurance claim. Plus, when it comes to the mechanical stuff, these reports can show you any gaps or irregularities in the service or the maintenance history. Not to mention, they can also flag any outstanding finances, if any recalls have been missed, or if there's any discrepancies with the odometer history. Look, knowing as much as you possibly can about the car's history before you buy is so critical, and this is just simply one of the best ways to do that. Motor Registry history reports are easily the most comprehensive in the country, and no matter if you're looking at buying a 300 series or really any car, they're an absolute must. There's a link down below, or scan the QR code on the screen. And another good way to get an indication of the car's history is to climb underneath and look for any signs of abuse or damage. These are an amazing off-roader, so a few, scratches and minor marks, that is to be expected. But if there are any signs of actual damage under there, yeah, not a good sign. Also, just make sure that any modifications or accessories fitted are top-notch quality items and fitted professionally, because the 300 series with the right mods can be a truly wonderful thing. Also, you could save yourself a whole bunch of cash because the previous owner has gone and spent all the money. But be careful, cheap and nasty mods can be an absolute nightmare. Plus, you've got to make sure that any wheel and tyre packages or lift kits or GVM upgrades or even any bar work is actually legal. We know of scenarios where people have gone and bought a modified car drive it around and everything seems fine. Then they go to re-register it, and that's when they learn that the mods are actually illegal. Then it's up to them to spend the money and the time to make it all right again. Don't be that person. Back to things going wrong, apparently some of the earlier examples can be guilty of rattles coming from the dash and the windscreen mouldings. Now, this is actually a bit of a concern for many owners because unlike previous generations of Land Cruiser where interior and exterior trim is bolted and screwed to the vehicle, in this generation, Toyota are using a lot more plastic clips, and some owners are having them fail, hence rattles. Although look, this one, like so many out there, doesn't rattle at all and feels completely rock solid. But you've got to ask yourself, after 10 or 20 years of going on off-roading adventures or just driving on our terrible Australian roads, how long these plastic clips are going to last is really anyone's guess. Also, it's not just the dash and trim. Apparently, these rear seats can kind of rattle and vibrate. You might actually enjoy that, but if you're not into that kind of thing, fixing it is super easy. Jump on the awesome owners groups and forums. There's plenty of advice on there on how to fix this for free. But aside from these small trim annoyances, plenty of owners have actually complimented the overall wear and tear for these, both inside and out. Okay, a few owners have mentioned that some of the side bolsters are getting a little bit squidgy already, but overall, really good wear and tear. Like all the plastics around the entry points that generally cop heaps of abuse, wearing really well. Although in saying that, some models do feature gloss black plastic trim in sort of high traffic areas, and like any car with that shit, it scratches instantly and can look filthy in no time. Why do manufacturers keep using it? But according to the owners, the paint seems to be pretty resilient, the overall fit and finish is top-notch, and we really struggle to find any complaints about electronic gremlins. Which is interesting because plenty of its European rivals can be guilty of all of those things. SUVs from Mercedes-Benz can have issues like poor paint quality through to the badges falling off, the Audi Q7 can suffer from water ingress issues, and BMW and Land Rover SUVs, well, they seem to have all sorts of exterior electronic gremlins. But on the 300, no. None of those issues. Although that could be because quite often there are less electronics on the exterior to go wrong in the first place. But that's not actually a compliment, sometimes it's more of a complaint. Take the GX model Land Cruiser for example, $100,000, yet it doesn't come with parking sensors or blind spot monitors. Like a $30,000 Corolla has those features, yet a Land Cruiser asking sometimes 3 times the price doesn't. But that's not the only lack of feature that can be annoying. Just say you want to drive with the transmission in manual mode, but then have the cruise control on at the same time. No, can't do that. And then when it comes to the infotainment systems, typical for Toyota here, these can be a little bit shit. Owners have reported that they can be laggy or just slow to respond, or the entire interface just feels a bit sort of underwhelming, especially when you consider the cost of the overall vehicle. Also, there have been some complaints about Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and Bluetooth connection issues. However, apparently that 2025 software and tech update that we mentioned earlier has made a world of difference to these things. Although it hasn't seemed to improve the sound quality from the stereos. Now look, for models featuring the premium JBL sound system, so it's going to be the GR Sport and the Sahara here in Australia, they're apparently pretty good. But for the sound systems on the lesser quality stereos, yeah, not that flash. But good news here, updating all the speakers is an absolute breeze. In fact, we teamed up with our mates from Automotive Superstore to make a full kind of in-car entertainment guide video. It'll answer all of your questions. Also, if you want any towing or off-roading accessories, or really any car parts or accessories at all, check out Automotive Superstore. We've added their link down below too. For example, they carry a great range of aftermarket security systems, which might come in handy for one of these because the 300 series has become one of the most targeted vehicles for organised crime syndicates. The security concerns surrounding these things are serious, and reports show that some skilled low-life scumbags can hack into the car and have it stolen in under 60 seconds. Look, we don't have time in this video to delve into all the details. There's plenty of great information in the owners groups and the forums. Basically, these scumbags are either relaying the signal from the car key or they're hacking into the car's ECU. And look, Toyota are offering some solutions for this, like an old school kind of club lock thing. Honestly, that's a bit of a joke. Look, we just highly recommend checking out far more effective aftermarket solutions. And while you're updating the speakers and the security system, if the model you're looking at has the rear seat entertainment package, so it has the screens in the back, you might want to look into updating those because according to owners, they are hilariously outdated and honestly these days pretty much useless. But something that cannot be updated easily back here is just the amount of real estate. I'm exactly 20 centimeters taller than celebrity Land Cruiser owner and supplement salesman Joe Rogan. This is in my driving position, and yeah, like, it's not bad. My knees are barely rubbing up against the back of the seat, and you know, there's a decent amount of footroom here. But interestingly, there's less space back here than there is in a 200 series Land Cruiser, let alone something like an Audi Q7. Yeah, it's okay for space, but not amazing. But as far as other comfort back here, the seats are okay. They're not overly comfortable, but they're not uncomfortable. Windows are pretty big, so I don't feel claustrophobic at all. You can adjust the angles of these rear seats, I think. Sure you can. Yeah, you can, which is pretty cool. How far do they go back? That's pretty relaxing. Yeah. I was hoping to be more blown away by the rear accommodation, but I'm not. And as far as features and practicality, this being a VX, you get a power output, USB points there, you got your own air conditioning controls and ventilation just there, and vents above your head. Door bins that you can actually get to if you have legs, they're pretty easy. Again, scratchy plastics. That's gonna collect all sorts of crap. Mat pockets on the backs of the seats here, pull down armrest with flippy floppy Audi cup holders. Also, some models feature 7 seats, others are limited to 5 seats, but the 7-seat models, it's not exactly palatial for space back there. And in the same way that the 200 series rear seat room is larger than the 300 series, the same goes for the boot space as well. Although in saying that, the 300 is still very much at the pointy end of the field when it comes to accommodation back here. Although owners have complained that the lighting for the boot is pretty bloody ordinary, but that's pretty easily fixed. And it can be annoying that on some models, if you've got the engine running and the boot open, the alert noise just doesn't shut up. Toyota, can you just give it a button to turn that shit off, please? And as far as actually living with it, up front, these seats, fantastic, so comfortable, huge range of adjustment as well. Overall ergonomics, spot on. You could just spend hours and hours and thousands of kilometers in here in absolute comfort. And then as far as spaces for all of your crap, you've got a 2-tier glove box here. You've got a wireless charging spot for your phone just there. 2 cup holders here. They do have little kind of fingery things to hold a small pretentious coffee, like my double ristretto this morning. You've got a bisexual center console because it opens both ways, and this is huge, and also it can be refrigerated, and you've got a little removable drawer here. That is actually massive. Really, really good. Door bins. They're an okay size, and they're hard, scratchy plastic, which is good for wear and tear, but it might mean things are going to rattle around. This is going to collect all kind of filth and dust. There's a spot specifically for Daryl, the owner of this vehicle's business cards, just there. And you've got a spot for sunglasses up here, and what does Daryl wear? He wears NM Insurance sunglasses. Awesome. Now look, obviously the higher up the food chain you go, the better the materials become and the more features and equipment you get, especially on the post-2025 models. The entire range got a bit of a bump in the toys you're going to receive. But something that's important to know, compared to its European rivals, generally speaking, a Land Cruiser will come with more bells and whistles than any of them. Unless it's an Ineos Grenadier, but you can go and watch our full video on that car to find out what it has. And not only that, unlike a host of European SUVs that can attract all sorts of electronic gremlins and trim issues and water ingress problems, these, no, they apparently are pretty bulletproof. Nothing really goes wrong with these interiors. And before any of you jump in the comments going, yeah, that might be true, but you know, you can never match the interior vibe of a European SUV, I don't know about that. Like, compared to a Range Rover or a Land Rover interior that seems to focus more on just the sheer beauty of the aesthetics, this for me just feels a bit more rugged, but in a really high quality kind of way. I love this interior. And then others might claim that these cannot match a European SUV for driving refinement either. And you know what? I kind of call bullshit on that as well. Look, this might not waft along in the same way a Range Rover or even the current Defender does, but somehow Toyota have engineered just this immense feeling of confidence in this thing. And look, yes, this one does have aftermarket suspension and a GVM upgrade, so the ride is definitely more firm than the standard vehicle. And I've driven plenty of standard 300s, and they do feel a little bit more cushy than this. Again, maybe not quite at Euro levels, but again, they do it in their own special way. They still feel refined. And also, you are aware that this takes up quite a lot of real estate, but the sightlines and vision out is actually really good. So dealing with it in a built-up area, not too bad. And also, look, I know we touched on this before, but these things in terms of off-road ability, as plenty of YouTube videos have proven, so impressive. Actually, we spoke to someone who has extensive experience driving a host of different SUVs and four-wheel drives off-road, claims that in stock form compared to the competition, these are easily one of the very best he's ever driven. Also, if you are doing any of this sort of stuff, seeing where you're going is critical. That's why you need to hit the Wiper Tech link below to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades we've ever used. And then when it comes to fuel consumption, not too bad. Like, no one's getting the claimed factory figures at all. But around town, you can expect sort of the 10 to 12 litres per 100 Ks. And if you're towing a caravan when touring, expect around the 20 litres per 100 K mark. But arguably the biggest complaint we came across comes down to these transmissions. There are reports of jerky gear changes, especially at low speeds, or it can take forever for the gear shift to actually change down, or it kind of lurches and surges with power. Plus, there's also loads of complaints about DPF and 7th injector issues. Is this just the internet blowing things out of proportion, or are these genuine issues? I can't answer any of those questions because I'm not a qualified mechanic. Luckily, Jim is.
First up, let's talk about oil. Look, some owners are noticing some oil consumption. And look, I am not a fan of 0W20 and 0W30 oils in a hot climate like Australia, especially if you're leaning on the bloody thing. You really should be putting in either a 530 or better still a 540, which actually, if you read the fine print in your owner's manual, is totally okay. Now, if you go into your Toyota dealership and ask for this, they might not even have it in stock, and they're certainly not going to put it in there unless you specifically ask for it. So ask for it, plan ahead so they can order it in. It is a way better option. Another serious issue that owners complain about is instances of losing all engine power when towing up a steep hill with their caravan on a very hot day. Now, what's actually happening there? The engine is going into a thermal management mode or a torque reduction mode because it's basically, otherwise it's going to kill itself. The inlet temperatures go so high that it just reduces torque so it doesn't grenade the engine. One of the reasons it does this is because the air-to-water intercooler system really is just pushed beyond its limits and it just goes into limp mode to protect itself. One of the fixes here is you can get upgraded heat exchangers which reduces inlet temperatures and pretty much sorts out that problem. Another problem with the air-to-water intercooler system, the heat exchangers are at the front of the car behind the front bumper bar. Look, some aftermarket bull bars do restrict airflow to those heat exchangers, so it's a good idea to just check that the bull bar you have has enough circulation there. Another thing that is highly recommended if you're towing a heavy load is a transmission oil cooler. Another issue that the internet has largely overhyped are complications with DPFs and the DPF 7th injector. Let's face it, all modern direct injection cars have issues with their DPF and these are no exception. But at the moment, Toyota are doing all of that under warranty. Some owners are having issues with turbocharger problems or, to be more specific, the variable geometry turbo actuator. But at the moment, that is all getting done under warranty and it's not a very, very common problem anyway. Some owners also complain about a weird surging sensation, which can also then confuse the transmission. Look, some of that is caused by some of the bypass valves to the turbo. There are aftermarket components that can help with that, and if used with an aftermarket tune, pretty much sort that out. This actually can be misdiagnosed as a transmission issue, so just make sure they're looking at the right problem here. Personally, I am a little worried about the hot V configuration. These have the turbos and exhaust manifolds up in the V. Typically, any engine with a hot V configuration does suffer from problems related to heat soak, and in some manufacturers that can lead to turbo complications, which can be very expensive. So far these have been okay, but I do worry about the long-term prospects here, and I guess only time will tell. Now, even though Toyota does have a better parts network than most other manufacturers, some owners are experiencing in remote regions getting parts for these, so be prepared if you're stuck somewhere, you might have to wait a few weeks for the parts. Now, strap in, because I'm just going to go on a bit of a rant here. Now, upgrading the transmission coolers and heat exchangers to repair the shortcomings of a vehicle, I don't think that should be considered a criticism of the manufacturer. You can push any vehicle to and beyond its limits if you try hard enough. And it really shits me when you have owners that are happy to drop thousands of dollars on wheel and tyre upgrades and suspension upgrades, but bitch and moan when they've got to do a heat exchanger or a transmission cooler because they think they shouldn't have to. There is just a bit of hypocrisy going on here, just saying, if you're going to push the car to its limits, be prepared to do some upgrades. And heads up, any modification you make to this car to fix the so-called shortcomings will absolutely void your warranty, so just keep that in mind. Look, I know it seems like a lot of doom and gloom, but personally, if I was going to tow a caravan across the Simpson Desert in Australia, this is still the vehicle I would choose. Even though, yes, they do have some issues, they are still way more reliable than most of their competitors. Because Toyota has such a strong reliability reputation, when something does go wrong, people bloody carry on like numpties.
Now look, we understand that this video might give you the impression that a 300 series is just all doom and gloom and you should never buy one, but you got to remember, Toyota have sold thousands and thousands of these, and when you talk to the owners and even the service managers that work on these all the time, it does appear that the vast majority of owners absolutely adore their Land Cruiser. And chances are, if you buy one, you will too, as long as you buy the right one. Unfortunately, Toyota's incredible reputation for reliability can result in some owners assuming that their 300 series is just completely indestructible. This can result in some used examples missing critical maintenance and servicing or being driven with zero mechanical sympathy. Do not buy one that fits this description. And look, yeah, I understand a 300 series, it does hold its value incredibly well, so you'd like to think it's a relatively safe financial decision, and thank God too, because they're bloody expensive for what they are. But an abused example, especially out of warranty, it could cost you so much more than you're anticipating. Basically, find the best condition example you can afford, put it through a thorough pre-purchase inspection, and if it ticks all the boxes, yeah, buy it. Although, even though these can be absolutely bloody awesome, and I totally get it, personally, I'd still buy one of these instead. But just do yourself a favor and don't overload it, because we do it to the point actually that one owner we spoke to in saying that, that's kind of why you're buying a full-size Land Rover, not even a Land Rover, Land Cruiser, knob. Also, it's not just the